I'm live.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, recorded live on Twitch, Saturdays, 1500 Universal Time. I'm your host, Matterall. The makers of EVE are focusing on player versus environment with the Lifeblood expansion due out October 24th. Part of their direction features the Agency, which we'll talk about today. Along with that, we'll talk about news from around EVE and other developments. All right, if you would like to support the show, please think about giving subscribes, bits, or tips during the show. And if you listen to the live podcast, you can contribute through Patreon/Matterall. And on behalf of the team, thank you very much for all your support. All right, let's get into introductions right away. And we'll start at the top with Apothony, of course, starts with an A.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Caleb?
Hey guys.
Seamus from EVE University.
Hello.
And Tiberius from my corporation, Destructive Influence.
Good afternoon.
And our guest today, CSM member Yukiko Kami from Brave.
Hello, everyone.
Madam, not keying up.
Uh-oh. I think Matty died.
Oh, I was hitting the wrong push to talk.
Dub.
That was my mime, impersonating a host. Okay, so after a few player-driven shows, we've actually decided to turn back to EVE development and talk about the direction of the game, where it's going, how you can get involved with it. And so we're talking about the Agency today, which, when did the Agency actually start?
Well, I think the very first iteration we saw of it was, before it was called the Agency, was the Shadow of the Serpent event, where the very basic framework of here is your thing on your screen when you log in, and here is the thing in your top left hand of the screen, which tells you, here's the task you got to do today, and here's your progress towards rewards.
They tied the scope into it as well, haven't they?
Yeah, the scope was, I think the scope was the first iteration, if I remember rightly. My memory's kind of failing me at the moment. and then
Oh,
it
really?
became the agency. Yeah, so it was originally the Scope, and then it became the agency.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that at all. Is it
Yeah.
tied into opportunities at all, or is that a
I
totally
think
separate thing?
opportunities is a separate system.
Yeah, it is totally separate by now.
But as I
I mean-
understand it, opportunities again was part of the development process into what we see now as the agency, because it was, I think, certainly in the early days, I think it was CCP doing a lot of testing to see whether people would be open to the idea of having some sort of daily task to do.
It smells of the same mechanics, really. Like it's the next iteration of it, right?
Let's assume for a second that some people don't know what the scope is, what the agency is, what opportunities are. Seamus, can you walk us through what those are?
Sure. I was actually just starting up my client just to double check my notes. But so the opportunity system is a guide that CCP implemented about a year or two ago. Basically, it's kind of sort of like an achievement system from other games, but it's mostly geared towards introducing new players to the different activities that can take place. So if you're actually logged into your EVE Online client right now, which I will be in about a few seconds.
I'll let you log in. But in just to bring it back a little bit, was a way for them to kind of give people a little bit of training on what you're supposed to do in EVE.
Exactly. So it's at the top of the Neocom bar from the EVE menu. Go all the way to the bottom of the EVE menu. The third and fourth options from the bottom are respectively the agency and opportunities map.
And this stuff pops up automatically, doesn't it?
It does, yes. But if you want to actually consult the full list of opportunities, you can pull it up from the opportunities map. And additionally, the opportunities map, if you're actually looking at that window, there's a gear icon in the upper right. So if you want, you could suppress notifications, suppress aura dialogues. But all the opportunities that you can do are all right there. And as you can see from this, it's all mostly geared towards new players. Welcome to Eden, take a look around, career agents, your first mission, corporate identity, loot the spoils, so on and so forth. All right, so that's mostly just pop-ups, the map of the pop-up stuff that introduces new players to the various game mechanics of EVE Online.
Yeah.
It ties into the new player experience. So part of this you get done while doing the new player experience.
Exactly.
And then it extends your mechanical skills.
Yeah, anybody who's started playing EVE Online in the past year or two, I forget exactly when CCP rolled out the opportunities map, but anybody who's started playing in the past year or two will have seen this already. As for the agency, again, you can pull that up from the Neocom menu. And the agency is just a set of events of timed duration, usually every couple of weeks. If you perform the tasks that I don't know what agency this actually is. I haven't actually dug that deep into it. But if you actually perform the tasks requested for these events, then you'll get reward points towards various kinds of rewards. The current agency event ends in a little under 10 days. It's called Warzone Extraction. And the ones that's telling me, the task that it's telling me to do right now is defeat 20 sleeper ships for 20 reward points and complete the Warzone Extraction site for 10 reward points. Unfortunately, this is something that you have to stay on top of almost every single day. There isn't much room for error because these tasks come with 20-hour cooldowns, I believe. So you cannot do them too frequently.
That's right. Yep.
I love
It's essentially, if you want these rewards, you've got to do at least 10 or 11 or 12 daily quests in a 14-day period.
I love Caleb's cynicism when he says it's like EVE bingo.
It
A
is.
bit.
We have the daily EVE bingo and we have the shows. Someone's always going to use the same things. EVE is dying and blah, blah, blah.
All right. So one is opportunity seems to be geared towards new players to show them how to use the mechanics. The agency seems to be it was kind of a live event. And it's funny because CCP classifies live events as not actually devs working with players like it used to be. A live event is something that you can take on yourself that's happening for a temporary amount of time.
I'm not entirely clear on that. I don't know if the definition of live event has changed, but these are definitely timed duration events.
Yeah. Well, when they were talking about it in the Summit Minutes, they were saying live events, and this is what they were talking about, and they explained there that this is what we consider a live event.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it used to be, if you think about it, it used to be live events were the devs playing the game along with the players. Like the first Titan that was rolled out was basically, I think it was Serpentis Titan, was moved across New Eden, and players were encouraged to escort it to keep it from, things that were going to be attacking it. And that was considered a live event. There was a great race that was considered a live event, but these are all like devs in the game doing the live event with the players. The problem is because it's a sandbox and it has a history, they never knew the outcome. So it was hard for them to kind of keep the lore intact without the outcome kind of going all over the place.
I'm holding my pen over the D20 event.
Yeah.
On my bingo chart.
All right. But this is the instrument which they will be using. Well, actually, I'll say this. We didn't cover Scope, but Scope is basically an in-game news channel that produced videos. That would basically just tell you what was going on in the game after it happened. And usually it was announcing expansions as they were coming out. And Scope was really prominent in 2008 and 9 when the Imperium Age was coming out, because they used that. That was an interesting expansion. Does anyone remember that?
It's also the era when CCP was ramping up their video presence in general, right? I think that was actually where they got a team that was dedicated to doing more regular video content, and that became the Scope.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Anybody remember that expansion though, or is it? Well,
I started in the middle of Apocrypha. That sounds just a little before my time.
Yeah, it was just a couple expansions before that. But what they did was they went into downtime, and then all these news reports were coming out on the forums and during, like, not patch notes, but news. And it was all like RP'd, oh, this is happening, now this is happening, and now this is happening. And all these events were actually covered in the novel The Imperium Age. So you can read The Imperium Age, go back and look at the announcements during downtime that CCP was giving you. And that's when all the events in the book were happening. And then Scope was also reporting through videos a lot of the imagery that was in the novel as well. So it was pretty neat to see it tied together like that. So for me, it was great because I just started not long before, and I was reading the novel and seeing these things happen, and it just seemed to tie it all together into, like, a much bigger world than it was. But lately, Scope has come back and been this kind of it had a run there for a while of kind of showing notable players doing things inside the game. So it was a way of showing off the game, I think.
I think it's interesting when you put it like that, and when you generally tie up all these, call it loose ends in EVE history. It's almost it feels to me as if CCP are basically trying to bite over too much, and that they're trying to make a game with a skeleton crew, and they're still struggling with that. They have all these great ideas, they have all this great ambition stuff, and they're really rolling out things in a fairly decent way. It's just that they need about double the crew size to actually do it right, or in a way that you would compare to other AAA titles, right? Because I've been very impressed with what's been happening for the last 24 months or something like that. And this whole thing with the agency and the new player experience, they're kind of delivering a bit on what they promised, right? A new player will have a totally new experience and a different way into the game compared to anyone before this.
Oh, yep. So you're happy about the direction it's been going for the last 2 years?
Yeah, in general, I'm seeing a lot of very positive things. It's a bit haphazard and a little bit scattered all over the place, but I can kind of blame the roadmap and the rollout speed, and of course CSM coming in and saying, well, we have to get this before something else, which is valid and important, but that just maybe makes it a little bit difficult for CCP to do it in an order that actually makes sense.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah, I am all in favor of making the game more understandable to new players.
Absolutely, and I think they do a good job improving on that. I feel they have like 3 directions stuff is coming from. Like they have the big roadmap with all the Citadel changes and all that, which is the main thing they're working on. Then there's obviously the CSM and players that come in and say, we need this now. You can't wait another year to fix this. And then there is probably new people at CCP coming in. Someone mentioned Ghost earlier. Other people that have ideas on their own. I guess that's where stuff like the agency is coming from.
I was just mentioning Ghost because it's so funny that the new thing that's coming out is named the agency, and he talked a lot about bringing a player agency into the game, which is a whole new obvious pun. Is obvious, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious. Here's your agency. Okay, but the agency is so the agency is a new thing to kind of get you into live events, as they call them, or basically content. But it's going to be expanded into not just live events, but getting you into the game, almost in the form of a radar, and showing you all the different opportunities there are of things to do. We'll get into that in a minute when we talk about the new UI that's coming out. But for now, we have the agency has been through a few different things. Actually, even before it was the agency, it was just seasonal events, right? Like you had the October event with Blood Raiders. What are those things? What were those called?
I think each event had its own name, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so it didn't have an umbrella, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think CCP ever said that there was this event. It was just, came along Halloween, you had the Blood Raider, the Blood Harvest, and things like that. And what was the one that you did? Christmas?
Serpentis, I think.
Oh, the Shadow of the Serpent event, which was basically the precursor to the agency, because that was all done through the scope. Yep.
How many hours did it take for you to do that?
That was 80 hours to complete that. But this event is that event was very different to this one. A lot of the reward structure, like how the EVE daily bingo is played, is exactly the same way. But the actual event itself is very, very different from anything. In that one, you had sites that anybody could go into. You had to kill the things, and when you killed a certain number of the things, you could scoop the loot, or there were lots of different varied events that went around it. And the whole point of that was to grind up the points to get this blueprint for a ship. In these ones, they're a bit different. You still have the grind up for the points, but their specifics, the sites, it's just one site that you have that you go into. And it's a little bit different in that you're effectively doing a fetch quest within these sites. So you have to go in and pick up these items that drop and then return to the Quartermaster, who coincidentally, actually, the Quartermaster is a character from Valkyrie. So there's a weird sort of link in there for that sort of thing. But you go, you scoop these loots, and there's drifters in there a lot, and a lot of people complaining a lot about them because they apply a lot of electronic warfare, specifically energy neutralizers. But Noisy Game has done a whole bunch of testing on it. If you go and look at This Week in EVE, there's actually a link to his blog where he recommends a whole bunch of different fits and how to run the site as well, and what sort of loot you can expect. And the loot is typically like sleeper loot, blue loot, which you can sell back to NPCs, and some drugs.
Maybe
Drugs.
if you stop bitching and actually try and apply yourselves to the problem and actually make some effort, you can solve them. Who'd have thought?
Who would have thought?
Don't.
But yeah, a lot of people were are pretty upset about some people have been losing some very, very expensive ships in these sites, including one being Acades as well, which was the Alliance Tournament ship, because the person forgot to turn on the new NPCs on their overview.
Oh, so he got surprise attacked.
Yeah, so he went into the site, saw somebody to go kill. I'm going to kill him with Acades, and the drifters scrammed, webbed, neuted him to death, and there you go. Bye-bye, Acades, with 200 and something kill marks on it as well at the time. So,
oh, wow.
So that was pretty bad. But, the guy petitioned it and said, hey, what, CCP, I didn't know that I needed to turn on these NPCs, and I ended up losing a ship, really expensive ship, and it got reimbursed. So.
Oh, so he got reimbursed, huh?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get back the modules that dropped, only the modules that were destroyed.
Absolutely.
Oh, still, what do you guys think of that? This is a side note, but what would you think of that? Because
if it were rats that had been in the game for 5 years, then you'd lost to Kylie's because you're dumb. If it's rats they introduced last week and they didn't really make a hey, you need to change your overview, there are new rats, then, I can see them re-impressing that. And that seems
I think he got away with it because it was against nobody else that could counter-complain. But there's been a lot of times when, in fact, if you look at a lot of these things, the betrayal and unplugging of sovereignty from Korgoth or whatever for Band of Brothers was a new mechanic that had come out. PL losing all their space in Fountain was a new mechanic that had come out. They didn't quite figure out. Even in this last one with the Keepstar being swiped away from CO2, it was a mechanic that was kind of new. Like, you couldn't really figure out that it worked that way. None of that stuff was reimbursed. But again, that's between players, so maybe it's a bit different than when you screw up to a new mechanic that's just PvE.
Yeah,
it's not a new mechanic, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wonder, you go into a site with a gate and there will be something to fight. So at that point, I decide if I go in with an expensive ship or not. I mean, the overview was just a byproduct that made it harder to fight it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there seems to be two sort of arguments that are behind this. One, that it was because CCP genuinely messed up how the rats were shown, because they were just coming up as some strange code rather than their actual names. And then some other people were basically saying they would have still worked if you turned them on. I didn't do that, so I don't know whether it's actually a thing or not. But I think, from my perspective on this, if after all these years, still can't figure out a way to push some form of amendment to people's overviews in order to get these on, it kind of can be forgiven in the first few days of an event coming out, that you just YOLO a ship in and go, oh, hang on a minute, I wasn't prepared for this.
If I could get in a word edgewise, I was actually just about to say it would actually help if amongst our overview options for a given filter, we could add a filter for whenever new NPCs that can shoot at me are introduced, add them to this filter.
Well, I was going to say we can't go too far with it because Arendis points out that the dev admitted that the table entry was bugged because he didn't put it in correctly. So it was a dev error, and that's why they reimbursed the ship. So that puts that to rest. But it was nice to explore. All right, so going back to this, and what we're talking about here is the Warzone extractions, right? Is that what these things are called?
That's right.
Yep. And so these are part of the agency. And as we were saying before, the agency has kind of taken these seasonal events and put them under one umbrella, the agency. And so this seasonal event is the Warzone extraction. And it looks like it's tied to Valkyrie, which is very interesting because... Somebody tell me why that's interesting.
Because Valkyrie's doing a new patch or expansion, I think.
I think
they are indeed.
They're rolling out more lore integration into the events that they're creating. That's what it looks like, and it makes perfect sense that they're doing more of this in the wake of the whole event thing that they did with the LARP in Iceland at FanFest. And they were actually intending on doing something maybe in Amsterdam, as far as Falcon has said. So if this is some sort of ARG-like content, I know that the discourse is collecting some of the items, because there seem to be hints dropped at new content and things that are new in the whole lore perspective. And if they tie that into the other brands, it makes perfect sense that something is going to be integrated in what I call a soft integration instead of the old bombardment hardcore integration.
And that's the corrupted trinary relics that drop in the Warzone sites, yep.
There's also another point to make that Valkyrie will be non-VR compatible, so that is a great change. So I guess they hope for a bigger player base.
That's happening on the 26th, right?
Yeah, we'll all be able to finally try and play Valkyrie without the VR stuff.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, let's make sure we make that point really well. The in Tuesday, is it Tuesday? No. Yeah, Tuesday, or the 26th of this month, Valkyrie will be able to play it on your be played on your PC without any goggles or anything like that.
That's right, and it's not just this part of the update as well. They're actually rebalancing a whole bunch of ships. There's a whole bunch of new ships. There's lots of things that they're doing with the game now. So they've answered a lot of feedback that the Valkyrie community has been giving to them as well about balancing. So there's a huge update going on there, not just this VR thing. And they've been promoting, if you follow the Valkyrie Twitters and things like that, they've been showing off some of the new ships and stats and things. And they've added in some new roles and stuff for ships. So if you haven't tried it before, or you've tried it before and you're looking to get back into it again, there's a lot of content for existing players and new ones as well.
Yeah, looking forward to the respond on all of that, because it's all going to be timed, so it's just before Vegas, and I know that Rue is actually going to be doing a presentation at Vegas, so it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to get standing applause or get killed.
Well, remember, there's when Dust 514 came out, people were kind of hyped about it because it was something they could play while they waited. And then they said, it's going to be PS3. And my whole corporation was like, oh, no, I can't believe they're doing that. I'm not getting a PS3 to because it's already, ending of its own life cycle. So why should I buy a PS3 to be able to play, a different version of EVE Online? So people were genuinely upset about that. Valkyrie came out, same thing. They made a deal. It was about, virtual reality. You needed to have goggles. But again, it wasn't.
You should remember, they did go back on the exclusivity. It was on all platforms from the beginning. All VR platforms were intended to get the rollout, right? So they already had learned from experience. But we have to also point out that in that time, right, in that era of game development, the whole thing of exclusivity and how these deals were made were very normal. So I can kind of give some sort of apology to CCP for doing that, except it was a huge mistake. And this time they've definitely learned the lesson.
Well, it's also retroactive. Maybe this was part of the plan and this is all the same lesson they learned, was to release it first exclusive, make some money on that deal, but then give it to the players later. And that's what's happening now. So what you're going to get is you're going to be able to play Valkyrie, on the same computer you're playing EVE Online. And that's happening Tuesday.
Mm. And also remember, even if you look at the stats for what you need to run Valkyrie now, without the VR headset, the stats requirement, the spec requirement on your computer is actually a lot lower. So if you didn't have the spec computer to run it now, you may actually have the spec computer to run it once it goes to Warzone.
Well, that's interesting too. So this Warzone then is very much tied to the release of Valkyrie, which is interesting. I didn't really see that link before.
Yeah, and hence the reason that the Quartermaster's included in these events in EVE, because he's also a character in Valkyrie that you approach to help fit out your ships and stuff like that.
Yeah. So again, I just want to reiterate that because that's a big deal. Valkyrie coming out Tuesday for PC without goggles. No extra equipment needed, which is cool.
I'm sure we're going to get a chance to actually cover it in next weekend's shows, because if it's as good as I hope it's going to get, definitely going to be covered.
Well, how good do you think it can get?
It's a flight sim fighter thing without all the hassle of traditional real life based flight sims. So I just think it's going to be amazing, and knowing how dedicated the VR audience is, it must be good.
It's a very different game to EVE Online. It's very much a pick up, log in, select your ship, get into a match, play for 20 minutes, maybe do another match, and then log out, sort of thing. It's way more accessible for a lot of people, and it's going to be even more accessible now.
without sounding very old, I think it reminds me of the Descent games. That was the first like full free 3D
Oh man, I remember them.
combat stuff, and it's what I'm hoping it's going to be, somewhere in between that and actually all Wing Commander, which then almost triggers all the
Wing Commander, the original. Well, the thing is that EVE players like play EVE and do other things. If you're mining, sometimes you watch Netflix, sometimes you're, dual boxing or whatever. But even then, you're doing something else. And one of the things I used to do is World of Tanks was really popular at one point. Then World of Warships was popular too. But people are playing these instant little fighting games while they're playing EVE at the same time. So now you can play Valkyrie if you want, while you're playing EVE at the same time, stay inside the same universe.
I think that's their underlying idea from CCP, that they are realizing this whole benefit of the cross-platform pollination thing, and then going multi-platform as well, right? So not just the different games, but also the tools you use to access the game. So I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing tablet-oriented content coming to EVE or some of the other games as well.
And Sephiroth Clone 5 says he's watching this show while playing EVE.
There you go. But
and in the Imperium, a lot of them are playing some sort of FPS while kind of playing EVE online as well, right? So you have this whole tabbing between two games, or even more, with Nova coming after the whole Valkyrie thing. We will have an FPS as well. So we will have a flight simulator, we'll have an FPS game, we will have the big strategic meta game, and then potentially maybe somewhere down the line, a tablet-oriented, PI or similar stuff. So then you're covered. You don't need to play anything except CCP brands.
Oh yeah, also have the party sports game, Spark.
Yeah. Oh, Spark. Oh yes, Spark came out as well quite recently too.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. I've been quite entertained by CCP Falcon's videos on it, especially the one with the guy at the start, because you can talk to each other when you're playing a match with each other. And there's a guy that he's videoed starting off a match going, "I bow before a match as a respect of honor to the dead because I'm going to destroy you." I thought, oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and
it's really pretty funny that game.
I love that Lilo was playing it in the background last time he was actually on one of the shows. That was so funny.
Yeah, she looked like she was rave dancing.
Yeah.
The rave dance of death.
Apothny, were you going to say something about this?
No, I'm good.
I mean,
Right.
I think the only thing I'd probably want to finish this section on is I still have hopes and dreams there back that what we were shown back in 2000 and I want to say 13. It may have been 12 when we were shown at the final keynotes at FanFest. Was like a mock-up of the log-on screen where you log in as your character, and it would ask you which game you wanted to play, and as you selected each game, it showed your EVE character as they were in EVE, and then it showed them with a Valkyrie flight suit, and then it showed them with a Dust Trooper power armor on. And I still hope one day that that's going to be a thing, but as time goes on, I don't think it's going to be a thing anymore, and that leaves me a little bit sad.
Yeah, well, I don't think so, because the guy that was kind of behind that, and it seems that's how CCP works. Certain guys get behind certain projects, and then when they go, there's a lot less momentum for it to pick it up and run with it. But that guy went on to NVIDIA, so he's no longer with the company, which means that kind of vision seems to have been like post-Incarna, pre-CCP Seagull, I think.
See that with that logic, I told you have to go and blame Soundwave for PI still being this horrible.
Because when he left, that was kind of the end of development.
And it's not been iterated on at all. Like hardly anything has been changed in PI since he left, and it was kind of his baby as far as I know.
Yeah. Turns out he doesn't live far from me here in Los Angeles.
And his offices is almost next to you, right? Yeah.
So we travel the same commute, drink at the same coffee shops. If I bump into him, I'll say, "Hey, what happened to PI?" He'll be like, "What? That was a different life ago." Anyway, yeah. So the Warzone extractions are the new adventure, I guess, inside of the agency. But what's really striking to me is the unification of opportunities to do things. And that looks like it's going to be mostly consolidated into a new UI, which was really just announced during the summit minutes. So it hasn't been talked about that much. But in the minutes, they did cover it pretty well. If you want to go back there, you can check out what that's about. And you're going to be able to see on a map basically what's around you and what there is to do. So if somebody comes into the game, says, I only have like an hour, so what should I do? That's kind of funny to say, right? I only have an hour to play Eve. No, normally it's like
some people
multiple hour affair. But yeah, you just basically would look on there and find things to do. And more stuff is going to be put into there. And who knows where it ends, but there'll be definitely, it'll be your newspaper when you get into the game to see what's going on out there and what you can get involved with.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a part of a bigger overhaul of user interface stuff. And I definitely see that they are being very active in trying to roll out some new stuff.
They already pointed towards adding more stuff to this session finder, how they call it. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool, especially for people that don't have too much time and newer players to have some orientation, where to go, what to do.
It's also the fastest reacting team, isn't it? I remember something about, was it Falcon or Fozzie being asked something on this show about a feature, and that team had actually already fixed it and he hadn't even noticed.
Oh, really? They're that quick at fixing things?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think was it Kakua that had already posted and fixed it in the past.
Oh, that was, yeah, true.
So the initially, when it first launches, you're going to be able to see the events from the agency that are out. You're going to be able to find agents in there. You're going to be able to find what's coming, Resource Wars, that's coming this next expansion, which are basically mining missions and defense of mining facilities and stuff. You're going to be able to find asteroid belts, epic arc agents, and signatures and anomalies. Those are the things that are going to be included in the first wave of this new, I don't even know if it has a name.
I don't know if Yukiko can lift a little bit of the veil on this, but all of these things that are being rolled out are tied into that whole new AI stuff, especially with things like standing and responsive NPCs. So there's definitely some very interesting chaos down the line, potentially.
What's not going to be included are incursions, landmarks, factional warfare stuff's not in there, or escalations for exploration sites. So, because kind of the higher end PvE is not going to be there.
It's probably a matter of time. I mean, we mentioned those things at the summit because they obviously lean towards being in there some way. So I guess that will happen sooner or later after the release.
Yeah, and as Larrikin pointed out, I think also on this show, was the whole thing that their intention is to get all of these things into the same user interface and into the new AI and all that stuff. But it's going to be a matter of priority of what goes in first. Yeah,
also I would I mean, it's pretty important also that we point them to having this in a way that it's not revealing information that you wouldn't get otherwise. So there will never be like, I don't know, the anomalies that you didn't scan out, stuff like that.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. You have to discover stuff still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and so that's interesting. So you can tell by, the stuff they leave out because they're mentioning it, that will be included at a certain point. So you can see this thing evolving, and you can get involved with this yourself right now because it's on test server. So if you want to go to CC, log into the test server where there are very few people testing out the new stuff that's not in game yet. You can go ahead and do that and see some of the stuff in there already.
And if you do that, make sure you provide lots of feedback to the devs.
One of the things people used to always say, go to the test server, and I never knew how to get there, but it's never been as easy as it is now because it's basically on the launcher. You just decide which server to go in. So you can play the normal server, or you can switch it to the test server right there in the launcher.
Yep. I mean, you might have to make sure that under your settings, you've got the test server selected, so you can see it on the drop-down menu. But otherwise, yeah, it's straight there. Because beforehand it used to be like copying a whole client over and creating a duplicate client and then messing around with some of the files to make sure it points to the right server, which was quite fun.
Don't remind me.
I vaguely remember that.
You had to basically program. You had to fix files a certain way. So anyway, it was a big mess. It was hard to do. Only certain players did it. But now test server is as easy as just switching a little switch. Once you say in your settings you want to see that server, you'll be able to see it and get into it. Very easy to do. And that's how these guys do a lot of the, like the Lone Wolf, who's a great podcaster. You see his stuff. He's on the test server, playing with it, showing you what it's like, how it works, and then tons of people are watching that because they want to be ready when it actually hits the game itself. You'll see a lot of people who do wormhole stuff get into test server to test out the new stuff for wormholes when it comes out, and they always dig up a lot of like lore hints, and then they talk about that before it ever enters the game.
This is why I would love to see CCP actually go ahead and do some sort of, I don't know if they could do it on a virtual machine setting, but doing historical servers so you could go in and see old versions of EVE, because that would just be mind-blowing.
Yeah, for a lot of new people, I think that would actually frighten them quite a lot. Like, oh my god, was the game really like this?
That would really put things in perspective, and it would also help us with some of the things when we talk about, well, when did this actually change from this type of gameplay to this type of gameplay, and when did they bring in these items, and when did these ships actually come in? So if they could have like, well, I don't know, X number of virtual servers that were running all the old versions of EVE, that would just be so cool.
The only thing I'd want to do with that, though, is to get an actual proper cavalry Raven with all the micro-warp drives that can keep up with its own missiles and fire. Like, literally, that would be the only thing I'd want to do, and just alpha ships with all my torpedoes. That would be great.
It would also be so nerdy, because you would most likely have to log in or have the client installed on a virtual machine. So you would actually have a client on a virtual machine and the server on a virtual machine. Otherwise, it wouldn't work with modern technology.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was too nerdy.
No. That's what this show is all about. Just, thanks for doing that. Apothony, did you want to say something about PCU?
Sure. So one of the things that's nice to notice, whenever the PCU is going down on, I believe it's Cripper's site, eve-offline.net, something like that. Everybody on Reddit goes, "Oh my god, the game is doing oh my god." But really, like, and they do those kind of like red arrows and they just follow the current trend down. For the first time in a year, if we ignore the release of alphas, the PCU is actually going upwards. So I'm going to do the opposite and assume that trend is now consistent and exactly what's going to happen for the next year. So in about 10 months, we'll be hitting the most players logged in at once ever in EVE. That's what I'm going with. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love that line.
EVE is alive.
Yeah, EVE lives, EVE is getting stronger, EVE is getting better. But realistically, you know, it's seasonal, right? Last year as well, we saw the summer slump. It's going back up into the more active winter. Like, in my mind, the way I look at the PCU over the past couple of years is that during wars, during eras of really a lot of stuff going on, the PCU does jump up to like 40, 50k. But it seems to be that no matter how stale the game is for many people, no matter if nothing's going on for months at a time, no matter if the player base is really upset and angry and whatever's going on, and CCP are seemingly not doing anything or making a bunch of mistakes, we always seem to hit this bedrock of like about 30k on the PCU. And like, that seems to be, no matter how bad things are, no matter how the PCU suddenly drops, you just kind of like hit a block at 30,000 players on the PCU. So it's nice to see the PCU going back up, more friends to play with, and hopefully this is a trend that we will see continuing going forward.
And it's good for Tiberius's plex position.
I'm sure a lot of people are saying, "Oh, good, new people to trick." They don't know the old games.
Topic, right? If this continues and you get the synergy effects from the new brands, they definitely need to consider it, because otherwise you could end up with totally unpayable plex, and you need to rebalance the whole economy from that.
Well, I think
if you look at the graph below, sorry for one second. If you look at the graph below that one on the site, is that the new players born graphs don't have an insane amount of variance. So this isn't a ton of new characters being created and joining the game. It looks like it's just people coming back after summer, or people who have had accounts returning, possibly because they've heard about Lifebud, possibly because they've been busy over the summer.
Well, I probably think it's the latter, but
yeah.
Anyone else on this?
No, I was just having a look at the same graphs as well, and yeah, there seems to be the PCU from this time last year is about 2,000 people higher than what it was. So that's pretty good.
And that, again, when we up 2,000 people get really scared that the game is going to trend this way until it's out of its life. And I like the idea of reversing that, saying this is the beginning of a trend for the next 6 months, which can be true, right? Because we're getting into winter.
And it would actually make perfect sense, right? Because if you consider all the things that are coming now, it's going to be very easy to bring the whole hype train back, right? The EVE Vegas coming up, EVE Amsterdam is coming up. Then you get the new patch. You get all the potential of them presenting things at Vegas that we haven't even considered or talked about yet. So the hype train is most likely going to leave the station.
Also, there's more than in the Summit Minutes, which I obviously cannot talk about, but I'm really looking forward to that also in terms of PCU.
So have we got some surprises coming up it's expecting EVE Vegas that we don't know anything about yet?
I don't know when. If EVE Vegas will be something to disclose the stuff, but I hope for soonish, let's say.
Well, that's interesting.
Cock tease you keep.
Yeah, I know, but I had to because
I bet you love it as well. That's the entire reason you're on the CSM, just to tease us.
Kind of, no, but it's actually because I'm so excited about it. I'm waiting for it.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll have you on when it gets announced. Hopefully at EVE Vegas, which is coming up in 2 weeks, I think. But yeah, last thing on this, the PCU is, again, there's a seasonal trend to EVE. There always has been. That's why when people panic the game is dying, they just haven't been around long enough to realize this happens every single summer. People go out and spend their summer with their families or have fun, or whoever knows what they do. They just stop playing EVE in the same numbers they played during the winter when it gets colder. And if you live anywhere outside of California or a sunny place like that all year round, that's just a trend that you get used to by looking at the numbers. So good. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Didn't we get half a confirmation? Was it from Falcon that there might actually be some Nova coverage officially presented at Vegas this year?
Yes, there was, but I have had since heard from someone from the old Dust and Nova community that when they had a word with one of the developers, they weren't sure what Falcon was talking about. So
so it's not actually 100% confirmed.
Absolutely,
but
right,
it was only the media crew that had access to it at FanFest, right?
Yeah. Well, we shall find out. But you did say something, Caleb, that was pretty interesting, the new synergy, and I think that is something that actually hasn't happened as well as it should have. When Dust came out, it was a first-person shooter that would attach to EVE Online through orbital strikes. So people in EVE Online could aid players inside of Dust. That didn't pan out the way they thought it would for various reasons.
And because it's on the field, right? I think from a marketing perspective, off-field, or what I call a soft integration, is so much more going to be the players creating that narrative, talking about the fact that, say, something in the lore is parallel in EVE and in Valkyrie. That's going to create content like the discourse commenting on it. So it's something that the players will pick up and run with, instead of this on-field where you're dependent on what actually happens in-game.
Yeah, so the new synergy is basically going to be Valkyrie, playing Valkyrie while you're playing EVE. At the same time, there's, what's it called? The Legion, I think? And
Nova.
So maybe...
Nova.
Oh, sorry, Nova. It was Dust, changed to Legion. Scratch those two. It's actually Nova. That's the one that it's called now. And that is a first-person shooter version of EVE to some degree. So you have other games that are all part of the same universe that might entice players to cross-pollinate those games. So we'll see.
Yep. And I know a lot of people that came over because of Dust on the PS3 because they became engaged in the wider universe. And when I realized that, hey, I can actually make a character that could potentially produce materials for my Dust characters, was never going to happen, and it never happened. But if I could have done that, I'm going to go create characters. And then Tiberius was born, and now my Dust toon is forever hiding on the server. No, yeah, pretty much.
And of course, my personal dream is that with the new Economic Council, maybe the integration will focus on integrating the economies of the brands at some point instead of trying to do game mechanics.
Yeah, Zuli, don't be confused. Dust is gone. There's no doubt about that. Although it did kind of break even, right, Tiberius?
Yeah, Dust broke into a profit. Only just, but it did actually break into a profit. And that's mainly because towards the last year of its development, there was a bunch of really cool stuff because I think CCP just turned around and went, you know what? We're kind of abandoning this. You guys go nuts and do whatever you want to do. And so they did. And they created a whole bunch of cool stuff, which a lot of people bought into. So, yeah, it broke even in the end.
Yeah. And Valkyrie did about the same?
Valkyrie did about the same, yeah. As of a few months back, Valkyrie broke even too. So it's recouped all its costs back, and whatever is CCP is making on it is now making a profit. And with this Warzone expansion coming out next week, they should be expanding it to a whole bunch more people as well.
And not to act like a teacher, but how did Gunjack do?
Gunjack did phenomenally well for I think when I was talking to one of them at FanFest about it, it was the number one on the chart. Wife is doing the recycling again. It was number one on the chart for the mobile VR games for literally months. It sold millions of copies, so it did really well.
Simple to develop. It was a simple concept. It was basically 3D Galaga, but in EVE, and you were a gunner on a mining ship defending it. And that was just it's funny, when I went to Vegas, was it last year, I played Valkyrie and then I played Gunjack, and I was like, this little Gunjack is pretty entertaining and it's tiny. So it didn't surprise me.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and thinking of other games and projects that CCP worked on, recently the Project Discovery team did a Ask Me Anything on Reddit. Quite interesting. It was on the R Science Reddit, which had a whole bunch of, it has hundreds of thousands of people on it. And I won't go into a lot of detail about the questions, but a lot of people were asking about the questions about how they do the data, what the kind of response has been. And the response has been just the same as it was last time. They're amazed at how much data the EVE community gets through. They've gotten, the EVE community as a whole has gotten through all the data sets way faster than they ever thought they would. And now they're currently busy collating all the information and collating all the data to see what sort of quality the data was. No planets discovered yet, but they said that there were some promising looking data sets, which they now have to go away and test and prove that there is actually a planet there before announcing it. So
that's kind of nuts, to think that EVE players discovered planets.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm hoping we get to name them soon.
Point out.
By the way, Tibbs, speaking of Valkyrie and Spock and stuff, is there any news on the whole Plus 10 gaming? Is there going to be some coverage of the new mechanics when Valkyrie hits?
Soon, TM.
Okay, so we're going to have to wait till next show.
We're going to wait till
market. CCP already has it. All right. Is there more on Project Discovery?
No, but it's very good. If you get a chance to go have a look at the AMA, there was some really, especially if you're a statistician or kind of into your, your exoplanet hunting and things like that. It's really interesting to read through because they do go into some depth about the science and the sort of things that they're doing to analyze the data and also some of the results from it. It's very interesting.
And to put it in perspective historically, right, the whole thing with the exoplanets, it's a topic that's just been exploding. I'm sure that Apotny has been following it as well. It's like, from my era, or our era, some of us are a little bit older, the whole Drake equation didn't have this whole boost that we've seen the last 5 years.
Yeah, for me, it was really interesting because I was at a camp, family camp this summer, and I met a professor from UC Berkeley, and we talked, and I told him about Project Discovery, and he was really interested in it. So I actually gave him information on it. And this is like a top tier astronomer, was giving lectures on the eclipse and how interesting it was and stuff. So the fact that he was interested in a serious way, like, tells you that this is kind of a new frontier, the crowdsourcing of these really smart people to help out with these things that only humans can do. Computers don't do this very well. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, but it's a huge leap, right? Because I remember it used to be very positive if you speculated that there was even 1 or 2 planets on every star on average, then you were going really high. But with the discoveries that they've had now, it's like easy to double that or even more, because there's like several planets in each star system that's been analyzed, right?
Oh, maybe we'll find New Eden after all.
Yeah, there was one very, very good near-Earth candidate found very close to us. I can't remember exactly if it was Tau Ceti or Proxima Centauri or something, where one of them is actually very, very Earth-like, with, of course, a totally different yearly rhythm. But it was very, very close. It has 120% Earth gravity, so very interesting indeed, and in the Goldilocks zone.
All right, more game stuff. Let's talk about what's going on there. Let's run through this list. Who's got first balance pass?
I can do first balance pass. Yeah, so this is the first one of the things that are coming out in the update very soon is the first sort of balance pass on a bunch of ships from the new team. And it includes the Rifter, Dragoon, Corax, Arbiter, Bellicose, Omen, Stabber, Tristan, and the Vexor. And they're all, so you'll kind of see that they're all alpha ships that alpha pilots can get to fly. So I can see that this is really kind of a aim at them to make those sort of ships much more accessible, much more usable. It includes things like swapping module slots around a little bit. Making the Corax a bit faster by making it less fat and giving it a bit more EHP and things like that. Giving things more fitting capacity, except the Vexor, which is getting a bit of a nerf because it's losing a great big chunk of power grid. So, sorry, Vexor pilots, but
the Tristan's getting fatter as well.
Yeah, no, Tristan's getting fatter as well, totally. So maybe we'll see less of those kitey Tristans flying around all over the place.
This is really, really awesome. They are broad changes. They aren't like super tight numbers wise. I guess that's arguable. These are the kind of changes I'd love if CCP did once every, say, 3 to 6 months. So they're just playing around with ships on the power curve. You're not necessarily nuking something into the ground or making something the new best flavor of the month ever. It's just something to change the state of balance between all the ships. So all your established knowledge of what beats what has to be retested. It's not flipped on its head, but you kind of have to retest what's good, and it's going to allow for a few new interesting fits. It means that the current flavor of the month is going to be more approachable. Like I just love that they're doing this, and especially with the focus on ships that alphas can fly and the ships that all of us can have a very low investing cost to just buy a stack of 10 of them with a fit you made up and just spend a weekend in Placid throwing them at each other for very small cost.
Botany, wouldn't it also be a good strategy to do balance passes in a less high and fast impacting way? So it's kind of like boiling the frog, that you don't notice that the meta is changing until it's actually like several iterations down.
I think that there's different types of balance pass for different issues. For me, this is a quality of life, mix things up a bit, a combination of looking at some ships that really are struggling and helping them out a bit, and also looking at the current flavor of the month and just taking them down like from 11 to a 9 or a 10, and it gives the player base a chance to test and reassess and see what's going on. All of your current logic kind of is still true. It's just that there are the varying degrees of supremacy of one thing over the other thing are no longer true, and maybe, you know, a ship that was the 8th worst ship is now the 6th worst ship in terms of in the PvP hierarchy, and that kind of thing. I think it's really interesting to do, and I think that that's a really cool ongoing iteration of balance pass rather than very specific targeted balance passes, which are things like the Great Ishtar nerf, which really had to be looked at, because that wasn't just specifically, I mean, that was the Ishtar, but it was also the way in which sentries worked on cruiser hulls, and how the entire way bonuses work on drone hulls had to be reassessed to go through that, and it was the entire way in which a class of doctrine fought, rather than these changes that I'm going to assume aren't going to have any huge impacts in terms of how these ships are necessarily flown, and how it's going to seriously affect a huge Nullsec meta in terms of what people are importing and stuff. This is a smaller kind of just like ongoing set of iteration that aren't super extreme.
I agree.
So more a bubbly thing than the hold my beer thing.
Yeah.
Yuki?
Yeah, I hope that this is exactly what will happen, that they frequently do this kind of balanced passes and just mix up the meta a bit. Actually, I would hope for even more than 3 to 6 months, although I guess 3 to 6 months is realistic.
And I'm particularly pleased that these are all, as said, like based on alpha ships as well, because I think there is a very well acknowledged imbalance when it comes to certain alpha ships. Like everybody's default one is go and get a Galente character because you don't really want to fly anything else. And I think this goes a long way to kind of addressing that balance. And I think that's a good thing.
Correct, yeah.
All right. Is that it for balancing? Yeah. That's that there is what I'm amazed at what a balance pass can do for a game, because when they redid I guess it was cruisers and battle cruisers, it was like refreshed T1 in a way that was useless before. Made it a whole new thing to build them. So
yeah, no piece of software is perfect in its first version, and game development is absolutely no different.
Yeah.
It's also, compared to many other games, we have a lot of different scenarios that these ships are used in. That is something people tend to forget. We have big fleet fights, we have small gangs, we have solo PvP, we have PvE, and to do a good balance pass is pretty hard compared to, I don't know, a MOBA where basically you have one style of playing the game and you can optimize for that.
Yeah. What they were doing at the beginning of the game were called imbalance passes, where basically they put anything they wanted into the game that sounded cool without balancing it. So a lot of what's happening over the last few years is what they call design debt, where they have to go back and fix and pay down that debt for things they did before. But that's when the game was super exciting and everything, like every 6 months was a new Christmas. But yeah. All right, we're going to move into in-game news, but I'm going to actually bring in an old friend, Ash Dorothy. Let's bring him in now. Somebody can grab him, or I'll grab him. Hello, Ash Dorothy.
Ash Dorothy!
Get your mic sorted. But yeah, so we're going to move into player news.
Ash Dorothy is like my top 3 favorite Eve like media producers of content. I love it.
Shame he left channel, so he didn't hear you say that.
Oh.
He came back.
I think he's muted. Can you talk?
He's not muted. He should have voice.
Well, he's
not transmitting. Yeah. So he may not have found his push to talk button for Discord yet.
If he works it out, he'll get a chance to talk. But player news.
There's a blip.
Yay!
My mic wasn't fully plugged in. How's it going?
Good. We were just flattering you while we were dragging you down. Hope you were well. Thanks for coming. All right, so we're moving on to player news now, and the CO2 aftermath. People who have talked about this all week long. It was kind of a therapy session inside of Talking in Stations Discord.
Yeah, no kidding.
Where there was 10, 15 people every day, all day long, talking themselves through the psychology of it and stuff. So you can't just ignore it from one week to the next. So we'll do a little aftermath about CO2, and let's take care of the news first. There, the Triumvirate lost all their SOV, right, Tiberius?
Yeah. So with the collapse of CO2, Triumvirate and Vanguard found themselves in a bit of a precarious situation. It was soon reported not long after the collapse that people were evacuating from space. And in the last sort of couple of days, all the Triumvirate SOV has gone. Finished.
Well, that's the end of that. So who benefited from CO2 corporations going to, they had to scatter because CO2 is basically dead. And where did most of those go?
It seems a lot of people have scattered about all over the place. A couple of the big winners have been so far Test, that swelled their ranks something between 1,200 to 1,400 pilots. Goons also took in a big influx of people as well, along with Moa, and there's somebody else at the back of my mind that I was talking about the other day, and it's completely gone. But there is a bunch of people, like the big winners have definitely been like Mordu's Angels and Test and things. They've taken, and Goons, they've taken on a lot of pilots from CO2.
Some went to darkness. Who knows if anybody will end up in NC dot? That's a possibility. But the only people who really left inside of CO2 were the core corporation there called the Serbian Mafia, I think. No, the Balkan Mafia. They're still there, and they'll probably die there.
Personally, I'm less interested about the first and the second chart, which are interesting, but the sovereignty and the outposts chart, what's going to happen to those? That's going to be a very interesting situation, because this collapse of space is fairly unique in the history of EVE, insofar as we're about to have a really major land rush in the next month or two. So that nullsec space that's suddenly vacant is about to become very valuable. All of those outposts are about to become very valuable.
And it looks like Brave was a big winner from that. Is that right, Yukiko?
Yes, indeed. We grabbed a couple of impasse systems and catch as well. So we are pretty spread right now.
Wow.
But the question is whether you can hold that space through change.
Let's say, look forward to that.
Now, when you say couple of systems, we're talking like 35?
Yeah, a couple.
So it was quite a lot. So you guys, like Brave has gone from having 8 systems to now quite a sizable chunk of space in 3 regions now. 2 regions, catch and impasse. Yeah, catch and impasse. So it's a good one for Brave.
Well, and on the flip side of that, the war was really over contesting the space of DRF, which owns a huge amount of territory. And so that's now stopped. So they get to keep, it looks like, their territory up until the change. And they're going to benefit quite nicely, because in this next change where all moons have some kind of material to offer, the more moons you have, the better, because the better chances you have of getting good moons. So people who own a lot of space are the ones that are going to benefit the most. So
that
not only
is only true.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel that is only true if you can tightly defend that space. I mean, looking at Imperial space, that is probably true. I'm not so sure about other alliances that have a lot of space, because you effectively need to defend the mining platform and also all the miners that go there. So if it's a fringe system somewhere out in space, I'm not sure if that is very beneficial for you, if that's
and you need to build them, right? You need to actually build all that real estate, and you need to populate it, and you need to defend it. It's not as easy as just saying the ones that have the most space is going to win. It's the ones that utilize it in the most effective way. So of course, it's most likely going to be Goons again, because I'm sure they've already done all the math. But it's going to be picked up by the rest of the community very fast. And then I think the smaller or medium-sized ones are actually going to benefit more than, say, the goons are. But again, I don't know yet.
Well, but the issue is that they may not mine the territory, but they can probably defend it since they've defended it so far. What they'll do is rent out the rights to it and basically possibly, because it used to be that a power would capture all the moons. So now they don't want those moons because they can't use them. Their guys aren't going to be the ones to go and mine them. So now they put that as part of the renting package. So the more territory,
I think you need to rethink the whole rental thing. You need to think somewhere in between the open areas in the past, the free ports, right, and rental. You need to find somewhere in between the two to really benefit from this mechanic, because it's kind of almost CCP forcing some sort of activity even from less affiliated, less active casual or even neutral players, right? So if you want to really make bank on this, you come up with the models to pay for the real estate, figure out how to not even rent it, but maybe sell it to neutral entities, and then have some sort of affiliation and investment in those assets in space. So it's the old rental model is, of course, it could work. I'm just saying that effectively you should consider something more novel.
Well, maybe, but I kind of think they're going to roll it into the package and say, just pay a little bit more. We won't even touch the moons. You can have those too.
But that's a racket, right? That's pretty much mobster methods, and I think the ones that are going to try to innovate on this are going to beat the ones that are using the old mobster methods.
I actually agree. In with the markets and with industry, with the engineering complexes, what we've seen generally is a increase in public facilities ran by players, as players realize that just getting people to use their stuff is valuable, even if it's not taxed or all that stuff. Although they still find ways to do all those kinds of things too. Oops. So what I think is going to happen, and what I think people aren't really thinking about in all of this, is that it's very scheduled. You get to decide how you want your moons to behave. So, for instance, like in FedUp, we have a couple of plans that we've been thinking about. Like maybe Friday is just going to be mining day, and we just set it so that all of our stuff shows up at the same time, so that people know what's going on. These are structured behavior. It's not like some random happenstance that is what a lot of content is defined as in EVE, right? It's like, oh, our stuff happened to be attacked this night, therefore what we're doing tonight happens to be intosising. Well, in this case, we know that Thursday nights is supposed to be, or Friday nights is supposed to be mining nights. The other thing that I've been thinking about is possibly people charging for admission, right? Because while I may not be able to deal with the hold on.
Deal with a small child at home?
Well, I think the point is that this whole thing that's rolling out now has a huge potential to involve what I would call the EVE financial sector, right? You can do a lot of control of your space by, of course, having sovereignty dominance and having the military force to actually put out there. But if you have renters, I'd call them neutrals, but you still have access to their markets and to their facilities and stuff like that, you can really let them do their own thing, and you're going to benefit anyways, because if they're very productive, that's going to mean something to the price. If they're not, but they have needs that they need to fulfill, right, they're going to then take advantage of the context with your services and facilities. So they're either going to be supplying or demanding exactly the things to make their life easy. So it's going to be potentially a financial sector revolution.
So a couple things. First of all, what I was suggesting is or what I was trying to say is that people, the strategy that I think somebody will go with, which might be effective, is what I call the ticket to ride. Basically, we know how much like a Hulk can mine in a period of time without any skills. So I could charge somebody X amount of ISK in order to bring a Hulk into my mining field, and then you're just allowed to mine whatever you want. Then I don't have to worry about the product. They've paid their ticket, they get to do their work, and then they can refine their stuff in my facilities if they want to use my rigs and whatnot. And in that sense, I have opened up way more opportunities for people to come. And although some people said that that means that some nights or the Friday nights will be Sov defense nights, because as soon as people find out you have a schedule, they will be there to disrupt your schedule. While that is true, I strongly recommend you, or I remind you that I have a scheduled Fortizar defense timer. It doesn't get hit a lot. And furthermore, what if all my miners are in ventures and crap like that? Like, who cares? It's not going to be worth hitting necessarily, but it's going to still be worth doing.
Well, we can pick up this.
That's why I hope that
last
they're
point
doing this with more than just the current moon materials. If they rolled it out for more things, it's going to be hugely beneficial, because then it's going to be like in the old days when you're only focusing on the really rare stuff as a sub-holding entity. That's where you're going to control that space, but the rest is just going to benefit you indirectly by making some raw materials cheaper, accessible to you as an organization, whether that's cheaper titanium or whether it's cheaper gases and stuff like that. You don't need to micromanage anymore. You don't need to use the old racket thing like a mobster. You can just let the money actually be the benefit.
Yeah, so we can pick this up later because we got plenty of time before the moon changes. We've already covered it a few shows. Maybe we'll have another show on it, talk about the theory about what may happen. But I want to move on to doctrines and talk about Jumpy Ravens. So Apothony or Tiberius?
Yeah, I love the Jumpy
Wake back
Raven.
up, wake back up.
I love the Jumpy Ravens so much.
I get to be that guy.
I'm fully aware they're pretty garbage. Like, I think they're actually quite bad. But I love the concept of using Command Destroyer jumping as a core function within a fleet, rather than an opportunistic, we'll jump bubbles away, we'll jump bombs away, we'll jump the enemy logistics away as and when we can. This is something that I've experimented with Armor Phantasms and Logifrix, which works quite well as a roaming doctrine, I found. I don't like them in Ravens, because in these larger fleet fights, keeping your Logi with you is a lot more difficult. Obviously, if you have logistics in a typical fight, if you use cruiser logistics, they want to stay like 30k away from you. So if you're keeping that maintained, it's very difficult to jump both at the same time. You need 2 sets of Command Destroyers for each thing. You've got to jump them so that they're still the same range apart. Here with sniper ships, going back to sniper battleships is a really cool idea. The local MJD has a different cooldown sometimes to what your other cooldowns are going to be, which makes it more difficult again. And they seem to get dumpstered here by Rokes that were, I'm not sure if they were regular Rokes that were just slightly counterfeit, on the day, pop one rig off for an Ionic and then double tracking computer and some Sigabs in the lows, compared to normal rail Rokes. They were just normal rail Rokes with a few more range mods added. I'm not sure if it was that or a very specific doctrine, but I think in the case of these Armor Ravens, not a massive fan. I think that just a DCU and a plate, that's going to just reduce your agility massively, so it's going to be harder to align. You're more mass. That's a bit more difficult. All the SIBOs and the tracking computers, the mids, like, I'm not sure why you choose Ravens. I guess the whole bonuses, I don't know, Ravens historically haven't been good. And then you've got missile travel time. Maybe you're cavalry running with them, with like the MJD for a double hit, but that seems like you do it once, you kill one thing, and then you lose half your fleet. You're still really a soft target for being bombed because you got so little AHP. Your reps don't matter that much because you got so little ISK. I think that if you're going to do a big snipey doctrine like that, you need the second doctrine on field engaging. So I think that in the case of snipey battleships, it's only really going to work in one of the really, 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 really big fights.
Yeah, I mean, we've NT.
Did Apothony run out of oxygen?
I think so. NC has been fighting these for a couple of weeks, and I'm not going to lie, they have been so frustrating because they're so difficult to pin down.
Who are we fighting? Who invented these?
So it was the Initiative that invented them. McLeod did tell me which FC it was, but it was a guy that was pretty notorious within the Initiative for coming up with some unique and interesting doctrines. And they did the whole, hey, we got a surprise, we got something new to try out, and in you go, oh look, there's Ravens on contract, and everybody's like, what are these? What are these things? What is this fit? Why are they armor? What is all the things in the mid slots? And then he's just like basically reassuring everybody, say, hey, no, it will all come clear when it comes to it. And of course, typical thing, we've gone in, NC's gone in to attack, defend towers, and these things blink around the field using their MJD destroyers, land at 300 plus kilometers, and then shoot Fury cruise missiles, while each one of them does about 600 DPS. They melt faxes that aren't on the ball. If faxes aren't paying attention and they haven't got a decent sort of fit on them, they melt very, very quickly, and they'll melt in fact, one, I think it was a Nyx last night, got into half armor yesterday before we could do anything about it. They are quite scary, and they are very, very hard to pin down. But when you do pin them down, whether by pipe bombing them with Macarials or using a long-range sniper doctrine in counter to them, they are quite fragile. So it's all about keeping that mobility, keeping moving, and that is their big strength. So it's very, very interesting doctrine, and it's been really, really nice to see something beyond just the usual, Macarial doctrines that we've all been seeing, and I'm quite pleased that it's come out.
Yeah, even though I just kind of chat on them a little bit. Like I said at the very beginning, and that I love them. I love them because they are a non-standard fitting principle to design. Usually it's how much tank can you get, how much projection and application can you get, then how much DPS do you have. And then you just sit shooting each other in each other's optimals, and you just kind of see how things go. This is a new engagement style. Well, not new. This is a different engagement style fit for a specific purpose. And what happens is that you bring this out, and then, NC counters with their own fit to counter this. And this is what I love to see, where each side is theory crafting each other and pushing each other about. It is all very well having your, alliance generic, this is what we brawl in, good for multiple purpose. If you're on grid, this can fight most things kind of fit. But I love seeing groups just go for very specific kind of, even if it's more gimmicky fits that do a specific thing, even if it only wins them a couple fights, and then they switch out to something else. Seeing that dynamic developing gameplay for me is what I love about even whenever I used to do FCing, which I used to do a lot more than I do now. I always loved flying off meta specific things that have a specific engagement style in mind, because you always catch people by surprise, and you'd always be able to achieve a lot more than flying what everyone else is flying, and they obviously then knew exactly how strong you were, exactly what your capabilities were, exactly how to counter you.
Yeah, then it's a matter of like intelligence, right? You know what they're going to bring, and then so you kind of have the hard counters already built in, which makes the game a lot more predictable. But leave it to Init, who's an unpredictable alliance, right? Like they also execute the what's it called? The whoosh, the swoosh, the boosh,
snatch fleet
with
there
the
you
booshes,
go.
yeah. Basically, that means they use command destroyers to come and grab part of your fleet and drag them away 100 kilometers. So they execute that very well.
Yeah, and both these fleet setups, whether it be Snatch Fleet or Jumpy Ravens, are designed to go up against an opponent where if you do try to brawl, you're probably not going to win. It's all about keeping mobile, moving around, keeping people off their toes, not getting pinned down, and it works really well. And I'm really glad to see new doctrines coming out and trying things out, because I saw them first and I was like, oh, Ravens, isn't that cute? Why are they blinking around all over the place? Why are they hitting us at 300 kilometers? Why is that fax melting?
It is said that wars are fought with the technology of the previous war. And the honest truth is that the machines of war grind slowly, because as I think Tiberius is pointing out, or maybe it was Pothny, conflict is very calculated, right? Like the doctrines that are used are generally designed to work at scale, which is different than working in small scale. This is true in real life as it is in EVE. And so when a new technology like command destroyers come out, the smaller entities play with it, experiment with it, iterate with it, because they have less to lose. It's just like, in game development, most of the revelations in game development now comes from indie game development, because they're more agile and they can iterate. But over time, those attempts and failures from the little guys start to trickle up, and eventually it becomes core components as it becomes trusted and tested and understood. And so now that command destroyers have been out for over a year and a half, we're starting to see them be more and more cornerstone to applications as we as a collective have started to understand and really absorb this technology better.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that it gives more players an opportunity to participate, because again, when you have the doctrines all set out, it's really a matter of intelligence. There's only 5 to 10 people that are gathering intelligence and working with the intelligence, and then you just assemble the troops to kind of go and fight that battle. The guys have fought that battle over and over and over again. It's not that exciting for them, but to face new enemies or to be the first to run a new idea, which is something that Pro God Legend did a lot early on, that's exciting for the players because they're a part of something that's new and not tested, and they can see that when it pays off big. Sometimes it doesn't pay off, but it's just neat to see.
I love blurring the lines of the decisions you make. Like as Mador was saying, I think it was Mador that, or it might have been Ashdorthi actually, that
but I'll take credit for it.
Warfare is so calculated. If we go back to the days of the Ishtar, which I of course love hating still, everybody knew exactly what your optimal was, what your full off was, how much damage you do, exactly how many Ishtars you'd need to kill a specific thing, and it was just dull, right? It was just incredibly dull for everyone. You knew exactly what the fight was going to look like and how it's going to end before you got on grid. Whereas when you're bringing out new doctrines, you're flying new stuff, and when you add skill checks into the game and you add more variables to play around with, you increase the blurriness as in terms of what your decisions mean in terms of their outcomes. So if you imagine the breadth of decision making being like this, sorry for people on video who can't see me, so like this is your variance of outcome for a certain decision. If you add new game mechanics and try and do new things that people haven't seen before, even if it's bad and you don't know that yet, your variance of possibility goes out to here. So if you fly well and you think well and you make good decisions, you're going to get a better result. However, if you cock it completely or you weren't thinking very well, it's going to go way worse than you expected. So flying the standard best logic is very, very safe. You have this small variance of performance, whereas new, weird skill check decision-making stuff broadens that.
Too bad not everyone can see the video because Apothony is using his hands and his mouse is pushing the button so he can talk.
Sorry, did my mic cut out? I was trying to hold it and...
No, you did it.
No, you did it. You did it.
Great.
You're my hero.
Yeah. That was awesome. All right. So yeah, Jumpy. Who named him Jumpy Ravens? Because that's hilarious.
I just call them. Well, I just call them Jumpy Ravens. I don't think that's actually the doctrine name, but I just like calling them Jumpy Ravens.
It is now.
I thought it was just a parody on Hungry Hippos.
Well, it was kind of like on that vein.
Tiberius doesn't respect the power that he has.
But no, it's been really good, and I really love it when people take advantage of the sandbox and come up with innovative ways to fight an opponent. And I'd just like to thank Pando, I think it was the FC that was doing it now, because the name's coming to head and he's talking in the chat. Thank you for allowing me to fly the Rock. I thought it would be a ship I'd never ever get to fly in a fleet combat ever, but last night I actually got to undock and say, you can't stop the Rock.
Tibbs,
there was a small part of me that made me really happy.
Didn't fly when rocks were the doctrine?
Nope.
No. He came in after Dust. But how about that? Sniper battleships maybe coming back.
Oh, it was glorious. Like everybody turned around and went like, oh, we need T2 rails for this. Who's got T2 rails trained? And I was like, I've got them trained. And it was like, we don't have them trained. Who has T2 rails trained these days? Large rails. What is this nonsense? So
I've got a question actually. With the increased uses of command destroyers and the use of snipey doctrines, are we also seeing an increased use of shields, a decreased use of missiles, and an increased use of the defender missiles to protect against bombs?
Not yet.
Okay, so maybe that's the next step.
It's evolving. All right, moving on real quick. We're running out of time here, but we'll go a little over. This is fun. Wingspan turns 3 years old.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, we should get him on the show at some point. But I was looking at the amount of views that they get over time, and it's he's just got he's just well marketed. I think I guess that would be doxing, so I won't say anything. But he has the skills to market well. He and I work in the same industry, and he does it very well in the game. So his presentation is good, and so is the content and stuff. So it's really nice to see them last 3 years, because usually that kind of peters out once somebody gets their fix of attention or recognition. So good for him for sticking around.
Yeah, it was good to see that. And I've never yet had a torpedo delivery from them, and I hope never have to receive an email saying I got a torpedo delivery, so we'll see.
So that's mostly wormhole dwellers, but yeah. Lumpy lost a Titan. Anything about that interesting?
I only thought it was funny because of the way it was on Reddit. Because literally the post, "Hey Lumpy, your Titan's a little bit far from tether range," and then the next post underneath it was Lumpy loses a Titan.
Yeah, it was quite funny because, as I understand the story, it was the Lumpy FC's Titan, and he used it to bridge out a fleet, and he left it there and wasn't paying attention to it. And of course, most people play with Eve with the sand off, so he didn't hear any alerts or alarms or anything like that. PL saw it was close to the range, bumped it off the Astra house, dropped on it, exploded it, and Killer Bee then sent a message to the Lumpy FC saying sorry. Shortly after they blew it up, and then he tabbed back to have a look and see Titan was no longer, which I thought was quite funny.
Somebody's asking Ganj there if Bomber Bar disbanded. Anybody know about that?
I still think no, they're still active. There was a bit of a drama. There was Nova Valenta still does it. There was a bit of drama a few.
Well, they lost somebody passed away in real life that was important to that organization.
Yeah.
And so that might have affected it, but I don't know. I don't think so, though. I don't think it is disbanded.
No, I think they're just going through a little quiet phase. But I still see them flying around, and I've still seen them flying around.
Didn't that happen to RVB a while back? Like they declared them dead. Like this happens a lot to more public communities like MPSI and stuff like that. But hopefully another leader will pick up the reins in the mantle.
Well, yeah, we don't know but we do have an FC that hangs around TIS. You can ask him in public channel. I just put that inside of the chat. So invitation to TIS, Talking in Stations Discord. Come in there in public and ask your questions and see if they get answered there. Right on. So now this is important because I think this is where the next round of action is for Nullsec, and that is Fountain.
Has the curse of Fountain struck again? Has it claimed another alliance with the culture leaving? Fountain's one of those kind of weird places in the universe where there is a lot going on, but nothing really seems to come out from it. There's no news that seems to come out from it unless you're plugged into those sort of things. But the culture is officially leaving Fountain, and they're unanchoring their Keepstar.
So they're making an evac. It looks like, aren't the goons kind of invading that, or at least skirmishing up there?
I think. I don't know. They seem to take an opportunity to try and get some nice kills, but the culture pushed back and stopped a bunch of timers that the goons created. Whether they'll try again, I don't know. But they seem to be slowly pulling out of that area for reasons we haven't quite established yet. So if you know.
Yeah. Well, I've been hearing things around. I've been hearing things, and the goons seem to be active. Maybe something happens there in the next couple weeks, maybe before you Vegas. Look out for Fountain. Probably some activity going to happen there. I don't know what it is, but I just have heard some things. All right, and they unanchored their Keepstar, which is a big deal. So they're moving on. It looks like.
Mm-hmm. It comes out Monday evening, so that might be an interesting event. Funnily enough, the reason that everybody now knows that was coming out on Monday evening, and the reason it was posted onto Reddit, was because they told one of the Reddit moderators, Chelvis, that his posts were shit. So he just simply responded in local, "You're going to love my next post then."
What can go wrong when you unanchor a Keepstar?
Well, essentially, when you unanchor a Keepstar, it just turns back into the module that you deploy. You eject from your ship. So I don't know if somebody could actually kill it. They might. I think they might be able to shoot it, or somebody else could scoop it, or someone can destroy the hauler trying to take it away. So because you need a freighter to move these things around. You can't just put them in like a regular hauler or anything like that. You need a freighter to move a Keepstar
Can
around.
a jump freighter handle it?
No, I don't think a jump freighter can. I don't think
Needs to be a regular freighter, so that is pretty dangerous.
So you've got to be able to protect the area while you extract.
Yeah, it says that decommissioning is a 7-day process. During the 7 days of decommissioning, the structure will undergo its usual vulnerability hours. If the structure is successfully attacked during the vulnerability window, the decommissioning process will be canceled, and the structure will process through its normal vulnerability cycle.
Well, looks like that's an appointment won't be missed by some people who want to kill it.
Yeah, from the show info window, a Keepstar in a cargo hold has a volume of 800,000 cubic meters. Only freighters can handle that, not jump freighters.
Jump freighters end around 300,000.
Somewhere around that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That tells me that maybe goons are going to attack it and destroy it. And that would fall in line with revenge, right? They're on this whole kick of revenge with CO2 getting dissolved. And now Fountain, who warred against them during the casino war. This could be another brick in that wall.
Here's the question.
Just seeing the whole West being kind of weakened, right? And opening up for Imperium activity. So there's definitely something happening, right?
Here's my question. If you're goons and you're watching this thing on Anchor, do you go and blow it up before it unanchors? Or do you try to grab the hauler that's taking it away for hope that the Keepstar drops and you can have it?
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, actually. So we'll watch that because something's going to happen. I don't think they're going to walk away without a fight, personally. And the thing is that Fountain is not that far from Syndicate. They're next door to one another. And Syndicate is really kind of the territory right now of NC Dot fighting with Initiative and Snuff. So who knows, like, if those guys get involved as well, it could turn into a big fight.
I think I told you that we could maybe expect a clusterfuck war somewhere around, well, now more like 2 months down the line.
It sure looks like it. I think there's a lot of moving parts right now in Nullsec, null security space. So there definitely could start to be a lot of, instead of major campaigns, a lot of heavy hitting skirmishes. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Like I said, I suspect that you're going to see a lot of people be butthurt right now because, like I said, as you said, there's a lot of movement and there's also a lot of prizes to be won. And more importantly, no one really knows where the valuable territory is going to be next month because along with the moon mining changes, they're also rebalancing all the moons. So nobody really knows where the winning space is going to be right now. So what you're seeing, in my opinion, is a lot of jockeying for position, a lot of excuses to maneuver to get in a position to be able to do what you need to do. If you have forward-thinking leadership, you're going to see people kind of pick fights that they don't necessarily want, but allows them to make a maneuver that they want to make, like false flag operations.
Well, that's why I was saying the people who are covering more territory have the advantage because they can say, okay, well, that's the, of all our territory, that's the rich part. So we're just going to consolidate around that. The more territory you have at that point, the better odds you have of deciding what you want to protect because you're probably going to be the first to know what's there, I imagine. And
then we've even left out the whole trophy war thing, right? Which is most likely going to be very interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. The trophy war theoretically seems, and the trophy war is basically when the stations convert, they're going to be extremely valuable and you can pick them up and move them. So people may conquer a bunch of stations before that day actually happens. Then when it switches over, they have valuable stations to roll up and take and put wherever they want or keep them in place. So that's the trophy war. And the funny thing about it is it theoretically seems like a land rush, like, a big deal. But from the FCs that I've talked to, they seem to be playing it down, saying we don't know if it's going to be worth it because we don't know the statistics of how valuable those stations are going to be. So how much should we mobilize? Depends on how expensive those stations could be.
I I'm going to just call BS on that. And I could be wrong, but we know they're going to be faction Fortizars. We know they're going to be one of a kind. We know that they're going to have the rigs with the bonuses on it. Again, I personally believe that if I was a powerful entity, I would A, be maneuvering to be able to capitalize on this and whatever I can, and B, be publicly saying that it's no big deal for hope that other people aren't doing the same. I think we're seeing a lot of game theory right now, where the people that are saying things about what they're doing may not necessarily be being honest because they want us to think that they're doing something.
But the cost-benefit calculation is pretty much impossible right now because there's so many unknowns, right? Like the ones you just pointed out earlier, with what is distribution of space going to be? How much importance is it going to be that it moves into labor instead of AFK? So it's totally open. You have the geographical thing, you have the organizational power vacuum, you have the whole thing that the goons can now potentially come out of their slumber. It's drama all over the place. It's just, where's it going to kick off? Are we going to see that one shot that's setting everything off in Provi, equivalent to in Sarajevo? I don't know, but I think something is going to happen. And
there's always one thing that everybody needs to consider when it comes to these structures is that the base faction, the base structure itself will be the faction citadel. It will get some bonuses above a regular citadel. But if you leave them in place, those citadels will have their faction rigs on them, which will give them even bigger bonus. So it's going to be a decision that's made at the time on how valuable will these things be unanchored versus how valuable will they be to keep them there, versus like, do you want to risk losing them? Can you defend them? Can you look after them if you have them in your space? So yeah, there's so many unknowns about what's going to happen with that, but something is definitely going to be happening.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are huge that are on the way, and they're hard to predict what's going to happen. So we'll leave that there. Okay, real quick, a couple more things, and then I actually may do an encore of the stuff. Since we have Ashtarothi here, I might give him a chance to kind of give us his thoughts on PvE and the future. But that'll be after this. Next up is Andrew Groen has a new podcast. He was a guest here a couple of weeks back. You might remember. Great show. And he does a lot of historical stuff and deep historical stuff from 2003 to 2006 era. And so look out for that podcast called Empires of Eve, same as his book that he wrote, which is a history book on player wars.
It's so good. I don't necessarily want to waste a whole bunch of time, but that Andrew Groen is fantastic and his podcast is amazing.
Yeah, the audio book, if you want a longer version of it, is available through Amazon, and you should check that out. He's a good presenter, and so not only a good writer but a good presenter, and so you can listen in. I think it's about a 7-hour listen, and it's great. Okay, the wormhole. Whose is this? This is you, Tiberius.
Oh, yeah. Little public service announcement. CCP has not fixed the deep space transport over tank effect in wormholes. So don't do it. Which is essentially some wormholes have bonuses to tanking. And if you've dead space fit, in this particular instance, it was a Galente deep space transport with Pith X-type hardeners on it. With the wormhole effects, it actually put the resistances above 100%, which put the armor value into a negative amount. So when it got shot into armor, all it took was 1 point of damage to implode the thing instantly. So I thought they fixed this like 2 years ago, but apparently they have not. And the response from CCP Fozzie at the time was, we trust that wormhole dwellers are smart enough to know what they're doing.
Yeah. All right. So let's say what the out-of-game events are, and then maybe we'll do a little encore for Ashtarothi.
Absolutely. So coming up over the next few weeks, OmegaCon is in Charlottesville in the United States at the IX Art Park on the 29th of September. And there's a little gathering there for EVE players as well. They're all getting together, so make sure you check that out. There's the Houston monthly EVE meetup at the King's Head Pub on the 30th of September at their normal place. EVE Vegas is on the 6th of October, but if you didn't know about this event already and you haven't bought your ticket, then it's too late. It's all sold out, apparently to the tune of about 1,200 tickets, which is enormous. It makes it on par with FanFest as far as size goes as an event. So that's pretty impressive. G-Fleet is Germany's largest EVE meet. It's being held between the 13th of October and the 15th of October in Dusseldorf, Germany. Tickets are available for €58. So if you're in that area, go check that out. And then in EVE Dublin is on the 20th of October. Tickets are selling for that for €20. And you can make sure you go and check that one out. That's 20th of October. So go to evemeet.net. It's on the screen at the moment. Go check out these events and go and find out your info there. And if you've got an event that you're running, make sure you put it on there too, because it's pretty good too.
I have an event. Talking Stations is going to be at EVE Vegas. You're going to have Dirk McGurk there, Carneros, myself, and others. Unfortunately, some of our European friends can't be there, like Tiberius and Caleb.
No, don't remind me.
So we're going to have a breakfast. And it's going to be Friday morning, 9 a.m. Show up at 8:30 so we can all sit together. Otherwise, you're going to wait in line behind the rest of the public and sit separately. So that's, again, Friday, 9 a.m. Show up at 8:30. And that is at the Hash House, which you will find because it's right next to the Link, which is the hotel where the convention is staying. Again, that's Talking in Stations breakfast meetup. Let's hang around and talk and have breakfast at the same time. And this is all before registration starts. So I think it's kind of a good lead in if you can wake up that early, hopefully.
Matterall, just give them the time when they should show up. Just say 8:30. Don't give them any other times. It's going to confuse people. Just say 8:30 a.m. That's it. Done.
You're right. I won't even tell you the duration because we'll be there for a couple hours. But show up at 8:30. I know. I snuck it in there. 8:30 a.m. At the Hash House on Friday.
Now, just to stress that point, you need to get there early because if you don't get there on time, they're just going to shove you somewhere else. They could only accommodate a large group if you manage to get there early.
Yeah, it's fine. You don't have to sit near us, but it's fine. We'll mill around after that, and we'll be around registration too.
You can go the rest of your life and tell the story about
Matterall
the time close to Talking in Stations.
The Matterall and company will wave at you from across the restaurant.
That's right.
Or they give you a snide look and say, "You're not sitting at this table. Who are you?"
I like what Ashtarothi said. You can tell your grandkids the time that you came close to Talking in Stations. Perfect. All right, that is the end of the show, but we are going to stop and do a little encore because Ashtarothi is somebody who pays attention to a lot of things, including PvE and lore and stuff like that. So I do want to get his thoughts on the agency. What do you think?
Yeah. By the way, my son just came and sat on my lap, so this could go any direction. So the agency is really interesting. I've been watching it for the last year or so, actually more than a year, because it started with the Shadow of the Serpent event. But now it seems in the latest iteration to be kind of going somewhere different. Because we have the actual live events, which are structured roughly 2-week events, in which case you have to do dailies for roughly 7 days of that time in order to... Hold on a second.
I heard that music. Mm-hmm. That's definitely Sesame Street style stuff. Right?
Well, he has a little pen. Anyway, so basically, there's the live events, which are short form, objective based things. But then we have the new agency interface, which we see on Singularity, which I don't know if you've talked about, which is basically about finding content for people to do. Did you guys make that distinction, or are we just talking about the live event?
I'm sorry. Repeat your question.
Okay, so there's two different agency. There's two different kind of styles of agency now, because there's the live events, which are 2-week events that if you do dailies for 7 days out of those weeks, you get some sort of prize, blah blah blah, which is the agency that we've been seeing for the last year. However, on Singularity, we now see a new agency, which is basically a content connection system where it's like, these are the different mining sites that are going on. These are the different incursions that are going on. These are the different resource wars that are going on. And I believe that that's going to be constant. That's going to be not a every once in a while thing, but a, hey, new guy, you don't know what to do. Here's cool stuff to do. And it shows you the map and it shows all of the different stuff that's going on nearby you, or even not even nearby you, which boils down to what Ghost has been talking about for over a year, which is that phase 2 of the MPE, which is basically trying to help link people to content. So I think we're going to see kind of a combination of those two, of the live events and also just kind of general events that are going on. And what we're seeing is a big shift in EVE away from the content dictating what you're doing and more you dictating the content. And this goes back to what I was talking about with the mining fleets, because in mining fleet, with the mining changes, with the moon mining changes, you can schedule when the event happens, right? So we can have a mining night, and we can make sure that that happens. With all these things happening in space, with all these changes to the MPE happening, you're going to get that in general, right? So it's going to be like, oh, well, what do we want to do tonight? Well, we want to run extraction sites, or, hey, guys, I found a fob. Let's go run that. Like, there's going to be all different kinds of PvE activities for people to kind of rally behind and do. And then the agency is going to help kind of bridge that gap to make it so that people can find content. And that seems to be the overall goal, which I think is actually really important considering how much recruitment is going to be essential with the moon mining changes.
Wasn't there a component of it where you could meet new people? Like that was something that was in the minutes, maybe, that they try to make something.
So if you think about it, the extraction sites, for example, are cooperative, right? So like you could go there and somebody else would already be there. And if they happen to be mining, you could actually just mine it to help it finish faster. You both get rewards, or maybe if they're mining, you could fight, or if you're vice versa, because remember, it has combat and mining opportunities in each one of these sites. So what I think that they're doing is kind of what we saw in the Shadow of the Serpent, where it's not like, it's not necessarily like you have to go find your buddies in order to go do it. But what'll happen is, because you are going to encounter people that behooves you to work well with, hopefully that emergent behavior will come out of that. And some people will get along, and you'll see new structures come from that.
I think that's a big part of this that we didn't cover at the beginning of the show, was how you would meet new people and how you could form better social bonds. You know, like sometimes you get into a corp and you're like, well, I'll do my best to fit in, but they're not really your people, right? They have a different tone or different, style. And it's kind of hard to say, look, I don't like you guys, I'm going to go and find something better. So it's not something that happens that often. People just kind of put up with bad corps or corps that don't fit them for a while. So maybe this is a way of having a chance to kind of mix better.
That is specific to the resource wars, though. I'm not sure if that expands to all the other things, but could be interesting in the future to have the session finder also help with that. Something like an open fleet thingy to find.
Yeah, I mean, that's what those those purple fleets are all about, right? People coming from wherever they belong to as a corporation to join into a fleet and kind of go and have an adventure together. It's a very miscellaneous kind of like activity, but if there was some way to kind of have that constantly without it being just a fleet, I think that might be interesting.
Well, if they manage to somehow make standings meaningful and actually be balanced right, and the whole crime watch thing gets some sort of overhaul or integrated into the new AI, potentially you could get something similar to a PvP-centric version of what you see in games like Guild Wars, where you have casual meeting up and taking down PvE content, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what they're going for with, for instance, the fobs. The fobs really scream looking for 3 more Blood Raider fob in Jita or something like that to try to find a group to go do stuff.
What's a fob?
So one of the new things that they're introducing is pirate forward operating bases, which are basically like mini, those the Asbel, the Blood Raider Asbel or Sodios that we have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a scaled down version of that. So they're going to have little outposts in high sec that can be hunted down and attacked. So that's where I'm going to see like the new quote unquote raid content to be coming from. Whereas the resource wars is more the dungeon / solo content.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, I don't think we covered the forward operating bases of pirates.
Well, they've been really candid about it. We haven't gotten like an official dev blog, so a lot of my assumptions about it are exactly that. But it seems to be that it's based around a structure, and it feels like it's the next advancement of the Sodios.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a bit of information in the CSM's minutes. It's pretty much what you said. It will be interesting.
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest problems is that while we're talking about all these different things, a lot of times that we as podcasters or just as a community discuss each piece individually. And what I've been trying to get people to think about is what this is going to look like when it's all together, right? Because all these things are going to be happening all at the same time. And the God honest truth is that there's just going to be a lot of potentially interesting content going on, both PvE and PvP. And so what I hope to see is that we're going to see the rise of better PvE organizations. We see really good PvP organizations because of the necessity of that, right? Like the threat of the outside makes it so that people team up better. But PvE in EVE is generally speaking distilled down to this solo activity. Even the things that are cooperative try to get distilled down because trusting other people and coordinating with other people when it comes to PvE is often a risk that isn't necessary. So if they rethink it with that design goal in mind, I think that we could get a much better cohesion to EVE. And to people that think that it's a waste of time, the whole point of it is that these PvEers will eventually be PvPers, right? You got to give people time to feel comfortable with it. One of the big keys to agency, a lot of people or some people have asked me about the agency thing, like why are we telling people what to go do? How fundamentally not EVE is that, right? But the key to it is that, this is something I said on Hydrag, the skills that you need to learn in EVE is more than just how to pilot your ship. The actual education of how to make proper decisions, how to learn things, and how to manage your risk in EVE is a real lesson. And it's a lesson that we do as experienced players seem to not respect very much. Because what I find is most new players that quit end up quitting not because they don't understand how to fly their ship, but they don't understand how to make decisions in this game, how to decide what to do next. And the simple statement of you can do anything doesn't really work well. And that's why I think that the alpha program has actually been more successful with new people than a lot of the older people expected. Because when we see, we're going to be restricted by race, people see that as being taken away. Whereas a lot of new people have embraced it as seeing direction, right? Like, oh yeah, I want to be Galente, and that helps me decide what ships I fly. In the same way, this new agency program is helping people with that process of finding out what they want to do, right? It's like, oh, well, what is there to do? Mining. Okay, let me go do that. Oh, that sucked. I don't want to do that. Now I've practiced making decisions. I'm now doing something, and the next time I do it, I'm going to do it because I wanted to do it. I'm going to do it a little bit better. I'm going to iterate on it. The whole point of it is that we need to get people out there and doing things so that way they can, decide what they want to do. Whereas in the current EVE, people don't really know where to go after, say, the training missions.
I think when it comes to the grand perspective, it feels to me as if CCP are slowly figuring out how to make maybe the new AI and standing system and agency and all that stuff pretty much reinvigorate things like Nullsec on the long term and make that a totally new thing, just like they've pretty much made Aegisov or Fozisov a thing of the past with upwell structures, right? It's just a matter of when is this going to hit and actually make that impact that they seem to have planned.
Yeah, I would discourage people from thinking about this moving to other parts of space. Now, obviously, it will eventually, but like the idea that it's just going to translate straight across is probably misguided, simply because HiSec has a totally different design goal than Lowsec or Nullsec. The whole point of especially Nullsec is player engineered mechanics. So the idea of having like an emergent style thing and saying that the Sodios exist. So I guess you're going to see like maybe higher tier, like things that require organization in Nullsec, whereas In high sec, you're going to see things that replace organization, so that way people can still do things without that organization. And then when they're ready to do it fully themselves, then they'll move into more organized structures like low sec and null sec, and then proceed to do the more advanced stuff there.
We are going to continue this offline in the Discord for Talking in Stations and the public voice channel. The guys will be in there after the show, and we'll have this discussion there. You can always join us 7 days a week on Discord, where people are usually talking about stuff like this. But I'm going to wrap up the show. Yuki, is there something else you want to say?
No, not really. I mean, there's a lot to talk about in terms of the PV experience and the new features coming. I guess we can continue in public. It would take too long to.
Yeah. Ashtarothi, thanks so much for coming. Wish we could have planned it better to have you at the beginning of the show when we were discussing the topic, but I love the idea of listening to your thoughts on things. So I'm glad that we got this little encore in. Thanks, everybody, for watching today. That's going to be all that we have this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.